Morning, everybody. How you guys doing? Good, good, good. I got to say, it's great to be back at Vanderbilt. I this morning was walking around with Ka in the back, and when I told her when I finished up here, which was like December of 2003, she was like, "Oh, that was like over a decade ago," and I was like, "Thanks. I didn't think it was that long ago, but I'm reminded by now." So anyway, I'm actually going to change around some of my remarks. I had some stuff scripted, and we'll hit some of that stuff. But I guess I think I think it's probably a little more helpful for us to just keep this interactive. I tend to prefer that format, and I think it's probably a little more fruitful for you guys. You guys have all drank the Kool-Aid. You guys believe in this stuff, and you're committed to it. Clearly, you've devoted your careers to it. So, I'll make a few remarks, and then I think I'd really like to open it up and actually hear from you, see how we can be supportive, and kind of turn this into a little bit more of a brainstorming session, if that's cool. I tend to do that when I'm on the road with folks, and I think it's hopefully a little bit more helpful. Oh, geez. I hope I don't kill myself here. So first of all, I just want to say thanks to Vanderbilt for having me back. I guess as an alum, it's always nice to be able to give back to your institutions and take the time to reflect on your time on campus and how you grew and what you learned and how it's influenced your careers. And I guess for all of you in the room, I always start off by saying thanks because you guys are doing this work day in and day out. You're fighting probably with your deans. Hopefully they're not fights, but you're fighting for space and you're fighting for resources and you're trying to get your development teams in the room to raise money for your programs and for your students, and you're advising the students and guiding them and dealing with everything they've got to think about from counseling and putting together a resume to actually learning the stuff you're teaching them. So we do appreciate the work, and I say that again not necessarily in the position that I sit in, but as a former student. I'm a product of international education. My parents are products of international education. For some of you may know, my folks came from Egypt in the mid-'70s, and they thought they were just going to come on an exchange and do their PhDs and go back to Egypt, but they stayed because they loved the place. And I spent a lot of my childhood going back and forth, and if it wasn't for the tools that I picked up in class, and I say class, generally speaking, in my classes, I probably would have been lost. I probably would have been a little bit overwhelmed going back and forth. So again, as a former student, I just want to say thank you to everybody in the room. So I'll hit a few points, and then let's dig into anything. Is everybody in the room familiar? I know we have some folks who are not Title VI recipients. Is everybody familiar with the Title VI programs? Okay, so I'll skip that part. So again, I do work with the Title VI and the Fulbright Hays programs at the Department of Education. I've got a fantastic team. I'll dig in a little bit on Latin America, and as you know, I think most of you guys were at the project directors meeting that we had last spring. I talked a little bit, I think I just started at that point in time, I talked a little bit about telling the story and placing a huge emphasis within my team on communications. It was something that frankly we just hadn't done very well. We focused a lot on managing programs, but not a lot on articulating the impact of the programs. And I think it's something that sometimes doesn't always come as it isn't always first nature for us. But I really want to spend a little more time talking about that in our discussion. Let's focus a little bit on Latin America. So we've got a pretty robust commitment to Latin America, and IFLE, we're really excited about that. As you guys know, we support 16 national resource centers across the country, 23 Latin American languages, including Spanish. 22 of those are litorals. We're very proud of that. We have 15 institutions receiving FLAS. We have 317 FLAS students across the country, which we are excited about. Obviously, we wish these numbers were more. We wish there were more NRCs receiving more funding. That's not always in our hands, but we're doing what we can to fight for that. But that being said, I think we're doing very, very, very good work with the resources that we've got. And what I love, when I meet the FLAS students, I always try to make it a point to see FLAS students when I'm on campus. Our FLAS students, as you all know, are coming from so many different disciplines, everything from engineering to architecture, biology, across the board. We have folks who are studying literature and specifically focusing on language, and folks who are in business and medicine. And I think that's a really exciting narrative. And it's one that I love talking about, especially when I'm on the Hill or visiting with folks who are not as familiar with these programs. All of our NRCs are providing Spanish language support, and obviously in this day and age in this country, that is incredibly critical for our country and for our communities. You know, the debate that has taken hold of the country, I think, is has highlighted the work that you guys are doing, the importance of it. So I'd say keep on it. I'm also proud of the work that some of our cybers are doing and some of our LRCs are doing. If you guys are familiar with the cyber program, Centers for International Business Education Research, some in particular, the one that stands out for me is the one at the University of Miami. They're doing quite a bit of work in Latin America, and they've really infused language learning into the work they're doing, and it's great to see that integration of language into a business program like cyber and taking it out into the community where they're training business people who are going to go into different parts of Latin America, really getting them up to speed, not just to understand the language, but the culture and the context and how to do business properly and really understand the broader environmental factors. On the Fulbright Hays side, some of you may be familiar with the Fulbright Hays programs. We have 3 active programs right now. We currently have, since 2010, we funded 23 doctoral candidates to go to Latin America. They've studied everything from mining rights to indigenous history to language. Really a very impressive group. I know we've had a couple here at Vanderbilt, and I think I'll be seeing them a little bit later today. This coming summer, some of you may know, we've reformatted our Seminars Abroad program, which was one of our smaller programs, and we used to almost exclusively do it with China. But we're proud to say we'll actually be doing 3 seminars this coming summer. One will be in Senegal on religious diversity and pluralism. In Senegal, that'll be for post-secondary educators. We're doing one in India for K-12 educators, and that will be focused on social innovation and social change. But then the third one we're doing is actually we're partnering up with the Fulbright Commission in Peru, and we're sending K-12 teachers to Peru to study indigenous history. And we're really excited about that. It's just a different format for us in IFLE, and a lot of that came out of feedback directly from the community. So I always say, look, speak up, let us know if you have any thoughts, because we do have some, the ability to be a little bit creative within government and try to execute on things like that. So why do we invest in LCTLs? Why do we invest in LCTLs? Because I get this question quite a bit around town. People say, well, why doesn't everybody speak English? And I say, well, look, first of all, 75% of the world's population does not speak English, and those who do have very limited working proficiency in English, so we've got to keep that in mind. You guys know I always wave the business flag because I think it's critical and it's important. As I'm up on the Hill, ultimately for a lot of members of Congress, what their decision making oftentimes boils down to jobs. And what I tell them is, for the businesses in your district, do they really want to ignore 95% of the world's population that is outside of U.S. borders? They don't, and we have to factor in language, right? I used to be a development officer, and a big part of closing a gift or closing a deal is being able to communicate. So if you can't communicate with the world, good luck. You have to be able to do that. So with regards to LCTLs, so many countries in Latin America, the first language is not Spanish, right? 10% of Latin America's population speaks indigenous languages. And it's critical that we invest in those, or within a generation, our students will not. We will not have that language capacity here in the United States. And that's critical for us, and not just for national security purposes, and not just for the economy, and not just for businesses. But here at home, these languages are critical. I spent some time recently at NYU. Do we have anybody here from NYU? Right. So NYU, I met some of the students who were running the radio show. Do you guys know about this? Right. I was so impressed. For those of you who don't know, some of the grad students at NYU have started a radio show. It's called Quechua Hitari, is that right? Yeah. Really cool, super energetic. But these were grad students who took it upon themselves to do this radio show. Now, why is it significant? Why is a radio show significant in the sort of Title VI universe, or just in the world? There's 30 to 40,000 Quechua speakers in the greater New York area. A lot of these folks are new Americans. They've come. I remember when my folks, well, I don't remember it, I wasn't born yet, but my parents would tell me that when they first came to New York, they didn't know where to go for groceries, and they didn't know where to go for health care, and they didn't, luckily they go to the university, and they knew where to go for their education, but a lot of folks don't know what to do when it comes to education and health care and social services. And a lot of these students at NYU were helping that local community get integrated. And I try to humanize a lot of our stories, and I try to humanize a lot of our investments, and that's a fantastic example. We've got to talk about those kind of things. Nahuatl is spoken by 1.5 million people in Mexico. That was something that I learned recently. And as we think about companies trying to expand their reach, Mexico is a huge trading partner for us. We can't exclude certain portions of the population. We will never be able to appreciate any culture, we won't be able to appreciate any people if we don't speak their language. That's just a matter of fact. When the earthquake hit Haiti a number of years ago, I know many folks at USAID who were trained in Haitian Creole were part of that response team. That continues to be critical. So, I won't continue to go into the examples in the intelligence community and business. You all know that, but I'm going to summarize some of my notes, and I think we should just go ahead and begin the discussion. So, yeah. Very good. Yeah. So I'm actually going to wrap it up there because the rest of the stuff I think you all have heard. I think you all know. I think you guys have drank the Kool-Aid. I don't have to tell you the importance of this to public health, addressing issues like the Zika virus, training diplomats. You all know that. I think it's probably a little bit better use of our time if you guys want to just open it up. I know you guys are here to talk about distance learning, and you guys know we spend a lot of time thinking about broadening access. And I think distance learning is something that's incredibly critical to that because resources are limited, and technology is not the thing that we focus on. Technology is simply a means to an end. And for us at the department, when we, you guys have probably heard me say this over and over, that there's so many jobs that are tied to global trade. 1 in 5 is the number, sort of nationally, and in some areas, it's actually higher. So in a lot of cities, in fact, it's higher, and a lot of states where you wouldn't expect it, it's higher. I grew up in South Carolina, and when I began to see the numbers on how much the state of South Carolina is tied to global trade, some people would perceive, oh, here's a state that is probably not very globally connected. I see a gentleman from the University of Georgia nodding his head. You know what that's like. A lot of people tend to think that, oh, in South Carolina, there's not a lot of global trade. Nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, you've got companies like BMW and Michelin and Bosch and Boeing that have set up shop in our states because there's an opportunity. There. But what happens when a middle school or a high school has their social studies classes cut or their language classes cut? We see that over and over. It's in our papers. What happens when they don't meet the 2-year language requirement that a 4-year institution has, right? When they're a junior in high school or senior in high school and they can't apply. One of my good buddies in high school, that's exactly what happened to him. Couldn't meet the language requirement, didn't get into Clemson, didn't apply anywhere else, went to a community college. That community college didn't have fantastic language resources as well, not enough to meet transfer needs. He eventually dropped out, he got frustrated, and we see this over and over. And 2 years ago, he graduated from college. I'm glad he did. But it really derailed his path and his career. And luckily, he had a support system to be able to get back on track. But a lot of our students don't. And that's, I think, why language learning and combining it with sort of distance education is incredibly critical because of that access. When we have conversations around equity, language is a part of that. Global competencies are a part of that. So students who are not getting that early on are left out. And that's something we think about quite a bit. So I'll end my comments there. Again, I do want to say thank you for your commitment to this. We know you guys are doing hard work. I know we ask you a lot. I know we put a lot of rules in place, and I know I'll probably get we usually get some hate mail about PMFs, so we don't have to talk about that today. But yeah, let's focus on distance learning. Forget about the PMFs. I should have brought that up. But no, that being said, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I'm gonna end my comments here and just I'd love to hear from you guys. Thank you. Thoughts? Yeah.
Well, Mohamed, Valerie Finley from Tulane. I think one of the things that we're here today, or thanks to Becky and Avery, for many years we were completely discouraged from exploring any sort of technological assistance with language instruction. Yeah. And I think many of us feel very behind because we were told we absolutely could not use our Title VI or FLOSS funds to fund our students. Yeah. How has IFLE and how has the U.S. Department of Education come around on this, and what? I mean, we felt they were way behind, obviously, and why? Because we've gone from, absolutely cannot use technology to, an interpretation of the regulations now saying, well, they should go off on their own and study Rosetta Stone to get to the advanced level of another language, which was kind of shocking, I think, for all of us. If you
appreciate
could
that.
talk about kind of this evolution at the Department of Ed.
I'd say a couple things. In my time, when I came on board, September of 2014, my biggest realization was that the team needed to be rebuilt. Then we'd lost a lot of program officers. Part of it was coming out of the big budget cut that I think came through 2010, 2011. The team needed to be rebuilt because we couldn't service the grants, we couldn't operate the programs effectively with the infrastructure that we had. So I wasn't really thinking too much about technology. We weren't thinking too much about distance learning. It was really about rebuilding that core. I think we've done that. I feel pretty good about the new hires we brought on. You guys are probably working with Carolyn Collins. I know Carolyn's been great on our end. Carolyn also manages our communications portfolio as well. So in addition to rebuilding sort of the team and the manpower and the bandwidth, I wanted to rebuild, I wanted to build in a communications function, which was non-existent. I mean, in my mindset, you all are fairly creative people. You're leaders, obviously, or else you wouldn't have put together this proposal and won this grant, right? You guys are leaders in your field. So in my calculus was the centers will take care of their distance learning needs. We've got to rebuild the operation first. That was just fundamental for us. Now, in terms of distance learning, I haven't actually paid a lot of attention to it because I do see that some of it is actually taking place. There's platforms out there, and I don't see myself as a micromanager. I don't need to tell you what to do. You can do what you do with the program officer, and you can figure out what suits your needs and your students and how you want to connect with your colleagues. What we want to do is just make sure that on our end we are making it easier for you to do that. I hope we've done that. If we haven't, let us know. We'll try to smooth things out. And I think we're pretty good at listening to feedback. I think we've gotten better at it. Let me put it that way. So I don't know if that doesn't answer your question directly on distance learning, because frankly we haven't done too much on it. The one thing we are and you'll expect to see more on is open educational resources. Mm-hmm. That's one thing that we are paying a lot of attention to. So I don't know if any of you guys know Tim Duval on our team. Mm-hmm. So Tim's our lead on OER. Mm-hmm. So expect to see more guidance on that. The department as a whole is moving in that direction. And I'm sure for those of you who are developing teacher prep materials and modules, I'm sure all that's already machine readable and online. Mm-hmm. So this is not a huge departure from that, right? This is simply maybe tagging it with some metadata and then figuring out where it needs to go online so that it's searchable. That's something we will be focusing on a little bit in the next few months. But in terms of the distance learning, I mean, when I'm out there, I mean, I've seen like the CIC, I've seen folks already team teaching stuff online. I don't feel that I need to intervene with that. You guys are doing a great job. Now, if we do, let us know. If there are partnerships you want to seek, if there's doors you need opened, yeah, that's something we'll definitely dig into. So.
Could you talk a little bit more about the open education resources?
Yeah.
And what that is?
Yeah. So essentially, you all are familiar with Creative Commons? Are you familiar with Creative Commons? So if you're not, essentially it's just Creative Commons gives a license, as I understand it from our Office of Educational Technology. They're essentially giving sort of an open license. Like, you know how Google has moved all of its code into the public space and anybody can access its code. Essentially, we're doing that with curricular materials and educational resources. One of the things that this will enable us to do, this meta tagging, as I understand it, is it just makes it more searchable. It makes it easier for a teacher to find what they need. It's easier for us to track it, and I don't say that from necessarily a big brother perspective. I know when somebody in government says that, people can freak out. From my perspective, it's more about talking about impact, because I don't know, when you put a curricular module up on your website, I don't know how many people are downloading it. I don't know where it's going. I don't know what the impact is. It's great that you've developed this, but who's tracking how many downloads? Who's tracking how many uses? Who's tracking, are you just affecting the schools in your neighborhood, or are you affecting schools coast to coast? When I go to the Hill, I talk about these centers as a national resource, but I don't really have a lot of data to back that up. I mean, some of this is anecdotal, and that's a reality that we've kind of faced. So I think on the OER side of things, moving a lot of the things that you are producing in that direction will give us the ability to tag it. It's not going to be the first step or the second step, but down the road, somebody will be able to run some analytics on it. And I think for my purposes, that's helpful. We'll also be able to track how it's being used, who's using it. We've talked I've had some preliminary conversations with places like Google. Google has this new platform they've developed called Expeditions. Are you guys familiar with this? Part of it's, all right, so if you can imagine Street View, you guys know what Google Street View is, right? Where you take the little guy and you walk around the street. There's some huge opportunities there for, say, virtual study abroad. Or if you are teaching about a particular part of the world, you're teaching about China, you can literally take your classroom on a computer or on a tablet and walk your students through a particular neighborhood. And then what we are envisioning is, wouldn't it be great if the curriculum that someone has developed in an NRC pops up for the teacher, and then the questions pop up for the student in real time on that screen, right? I've gotten some funny looks, but I'm like, look, we can put a man on the moon. You're telling me we can't do this kind of thing? So those are the kinds of things that we're thinking about a little bit. I don't know that it's the department that's going to move that along, but what I want to do is make these materials publicly available, and hopefully somebody in the private sector can say, hey, listen, this might actually be a really good idea to bring this stuff together.
But so it's envisioned as, so you have this Creative Commons or this open education resources, and then we at the centers will upload the curriculum resources that we developed. Okay, yeah. So it's essentially, yeah.
I don't know that it's a central space. Okay. I don't know that it's a central repository, but I think you may have it on your site. Yes. But because it's tagged, it's almost like a search engine, from what I understand. If people can go in through a search and find your stuff because it's tagged.
Yeah, that's great.
We actually did a project exactly like this. I don't know, now we're going back 15 years ago we started it. It was based at UCLA. Good. It was called Outreach World, and we could not sustain it because it needs funding, right? Like for this tagging, for when it did work, I hope that everybody will agree, it was pretty cool resource. It was like a database. You could upload your materials, or you could not. You could just provide links to your own website where the materials were. Because all of us decided a very long time ago, at least in Latin America, that's what we do with class, is we always put our materials up online. But the technical expertise that was needed, UCLA needed to have somebody full-time, and they just lost, they continued to lose funding. They got cut, they had their Center for Middle Eastern Studies got cut, and then we just lost, and it's just sitting there now, with no tagging.
With no
and I
updates.
think that's one of our concerns throughout the years, is this ability to sustain that kind of tagging system, that it be accessible. I think all of us, we share our resources, and we at least in Latin America, we are super open with like trying to use each other's materials and promote them. And we also promote our colleagues, in Middle Eastern Studies and Asian Studies, because we know the same teachers. I think one thing that I know I keep repeating it, is just the sustainability factor is the hardest thing to overcome with a project like this, and that we would love to see. It would be great if somebody in the private sector would pick it up, but I don't know. I have.
Yeah, I'm excited that we're moving in this direction because it's new for us. In terms of OER, we will likely have some technical assistance workshops. It probably won't be right away. We call OET, the Office of Educational Technology, will be rolling out kind of their guidance for the department as a whole in the next few weeks, I think, maybe by the end of April. And we'll sort of adapt based on that. So expect to see more on that. We're still trying to I'm still trying to figure out, and I'm still learning about it, but my concern that I've brought to them is I don't want to burden the centers with more stuff to do and more like rules and regulations. We know you guys have a lot to deal with, and we know we give you a lot as is. My understanding is this is very sort of simple. This is going in almost, it's a little file, and you're just saying.
Well, all of us should be able to metadata.
It's really simple.
Our stuff anyway.
Yeah.
If we could have some standard tags to metadata, oh my God, that would just be amazing.
Yeah, and I think some of the standard tagging, things that I've requested. So when I'm out with the centers, I always say, look, if you're going to put something out there, just please say it's like Title VI funded. Just please say it's like U.S. Department of Education. Just kind of say that a little bit, please, and then talk about your school all you want. And that's essentially that's all this really is. The metadata is just tagging. So I I'm excited about it. I think it's a move in the right direction. I don't know that we're going to see, it's going to take a couple of steps for us to get it right. It'll take a couple of steps for us to really see the impact of it. But we've got to steer it in the right direction, I think.
You're all going to bring in grantees for, and to give feedback to help
Oh, yeah.
the process?
Yeah. No, we will. And it's one thing I've asked Tim to do is just, when we're ready, we'll do some technical assistance. There's some folks who are already doing this. So for those who are already doing it, let's talk about what was that process like? How did you train your folks? All the things that we need to figure out from a program management perspective. That's a good question. Yeah.
I've been hearing some amazing ideas here. So again, thanks to Becky and Avery for putting this together about how we can use technology. But as usual, the roadblock I'll be running into is funding to basically get the technology that I need at my campus to do this. And I'm confident that I won't get this from my university because, again, even though in the long term this will enhance sustainability, it's still small numbers of students, okay?
By
And
nature of
it's
it,
still
yeah.
very much a business model, and they want to invest in numbers, and Lichtel's just aren't it.
Yeah.
So what I'm curious about, and I don't know how the regs restrict the possibility, but do you foresee in the next round us being able to build in a higher amount of funding requests for technology?
We're starting to
Yeah.
do some planning around that, and I'd love to actually get a little feedback from you guys on that. It's one of the things I brought up to Cheryl was we do have to think a little more about sustainability these programs. So let me kind of back out. Have you guys seen the president's budget for this year? Mm-hmm. Okay, so just to be frank and sort of dig into it. You all know that when I come visit, for those of you whose campuses I have visited, I usually try to see the development team as well, the fundraising team. And I say that not because I want to wave a red flag and I want to freak anybody out. I don't.
Yeah.
But that being said, well, no. Well, that being said, look, you guys watch the news. You see what DC is like. You see sometimes that. I'll leave it at that. I say this with the useful grantees. You guys are familiar with our useful program. It's a seed grant program for community colleges. I would love nothing more than to be able to seed a school, have them build up a program, and then move that money to somebody else. I want to take your funding away. And you know what? And the same is actually true with the NRCs. I want you to set up your program. I would love for you to go out and land a gift. Was it Illinois? Is the University of Illinois here?
They're not here, there's none here.
Right. I think was it Illinois that got that $20 million gift from some Brazilian guy. That's fantastic. That's great. And that's what I want to see. Is I want to seed your program. I want you to do great things with it, and then I want to take it away and give it to somebody else who needs it. We are beginning to prioritize first-time applicants. With useful especially, we'll be doing that. So expect to see more of that, not because I want to take your funding away, but because I want to build up more of these programs. What I would say is, let me kind of back up. I talked a little bit about the importance of communications. Communications isn't just about pushing our messages out and saying, oh, how wonderful we are. We really have to talk about impact. We really, really, really have to talk about impact. So again, back on the technology piece. The other day I read a piece about a friend of mine who used to work at the National Security Council left and went to go work for a company in Silicon Valley. And he said, people keep coming to me and saying, oh, I'm ready to leave the policy world. I want to go work in tech. And he said it kind of drove him nuts because it's not about working in tech. Tech is not the end game. He was like, what problem do you want to solve? And he said, technology is a means to solve a problem. It's not about technology. It's not you just want to go work for Google. What problem do you want to solve with Google? In a lot of ways, that's how I see languages in general. That's how I see these Lichtels. It's not about just studying the language. It's what problem do you want to solve with it? What tool is it? And as we position the stuff that we do, I think it's critical for us to think about it in that way, right? Not just that I'm a specialist in Quechua or in Arabic or Mandarin. Okay, great. But there is a perception, and there's a perception that we have to fight, and it's an uphill battle. I think what's more helpful is to position it in terms of problem solving. Students who are trained in this language can solve this global issue. I think it's a much more powerful thing. I mean, I think about the United Way's model, right? When you give to the United Way, you're not giving to the United Way, you're giving through the United Way to solve an issue. When I worked at Georgetown, at the School of Foreign Service, that's what I talked about. I would go talk to folks and say, listen, you want to fix, you want to address poverty issues, give through Georgetown, train a student who's going to be able to do that when they graduate. They'll have the tools to be an effective manager and fix it. And that's how I think about our language programs. It's not just language on its own. It's you're equipping students, you're equipping our society to tackle these issues and be able to communicate, because you can't address Ebola if you don't speak the languages. It's not a function of just immunology. We've got to do a better job of articulating that and being able to sell it. This is good for our engineers who are going to go abroad. It's good for our finance majors who are going to go abroad. It's good for our diplomats and our folks who are AID. We've just got to do a better job of selling it.
One of the things that's come up here is I think everyone in this room wants to find ways to work together so that
Yeah.
we're not all duplicating efforts.
Yeah.
And it's very, very clear that
Yeah.
now that we can use distance learning,
Yeah.
if we pool our resources together and we basically, 4 universities invest in one instructor who we know will be available for a long period of time. 'Cause
Yeah.
the other thing is finding someone who can teach these languages is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
But if we can find an instructor, we bring our resources together, and that instructor is working with a classroom of 15 students, that is effective.
Yep.
Efficient.
But to be able to have the technology to do that
It's tough.
is
It's expensive.
tough, and it's expensive.
Mhm.
And, if it's something that your office could consider, I think that really does contribute to this whole effort of sustainability. Because in the past, we've been very limited with our equipment costs, which I completely understand. But I think this particular initiative, there's a good way to justify increasing the amount allowed for equipment costs if it's for a discrete project like this.
If I can
Okay.
just build on that, it also offers the opportunity for NRCs to collaborate around languages. So to create, if you're already sharing distance learning using that technology,
Yeah.
you can then work to use NRC funds to develop curriculum, to help develop
Yeah.
a pipeline of native language instructors, to develop OPI testing, all of that critical to the sustainability of these
Okay.
programs. So it really provides a sort of platform for even greater initiatives, more ambitious initiatives in creating materials and a pipeline of instructors that really provide for
Yeah.
sustainability.
Have any of the other clusters of NRCs have they done this with resources on their campus? And has the concept been, I don't want to say has it been proven in other contexts? Right, because I think TOML is doing it, right? I mean, I think, is it at Ohio State? You guys are teaching TOML online, or was it Columbia? It was Columbia. In Cornell, that's what it was.
Program. A lot of us
Yeah.
have been doing it. I mean, I think the other thing beyond, but I agree that it is, I think it could make sense to be able to purchase some of this equipment with the NRC funds. I think the other thing that it can do is not just have the NRCs collaborating with each other, but one thing that we've really been thinking about is how can we offer language to particularly our MSI partners is what we've been thinking of, and they can't purchase the equipment and we can't purchase it for them. But that's really a way that we can spread our impact. I mean, going back to what you were saying about building these programs and us serving as resources, which is what we're supposed to do.
I appreciate that.
I think this would allow us to have a much broader reach, but the funding is the issue.
But I think we have to keep the UCLA problem in mind. I mean, I don't know anything about it because I'm not
Yeah.
even in the languages that you're in. But the sustainability of the technology, having purchased it is great, is wonderful, and having
It's
that
maintenance.
on it is great, but you need to have the maintenance.
Yeah.
We've done workshops around the country with K through 12 schools where I go in and they have, the $500,000 lab that nobody knows how to use because the teacher who initially put in the grant
Is
no
gone.
longer there and nobody else knows. And I think that would be, waste of government resources.
Yeah,
for one.
absolutely.
And so whoever wants to apply for funding to put in equipment needs to also be allowed to put in personnel or maintenance costs, because technology breaks, needs to be updated, so it needs to be a more long-term
Investment.
I appreciate
grant cycle or
that.
investment.
I appreciate that. Yeah, go ahead.
So I'd like to play devil's advocate and
Please.
go back to this, position that really we need to figure out a way to solve problems. You brought up the earthquake in Haiti. I'm at Florida International University in Miami. We're entering our 19th year of a FLAS-approved summer program to Haiti, intensive Haitian Creole language training. And, you know, when the earthquake happened, U.S. Southern Command was calling me in my office, asking us for language specialists. Go through your roster of everybody you've trained over the years and help us get the people
On the ground.
where we need them,
Yeah.
or even staying in Miami, but connecting the dots and helping with the coordination on the language side. And then when I think about sustainability and this regulation about whether or not we are permitted to fund FLAS graduate students
Summer.
with FLAS at the beginning level, I think about every one of those students that went through our Haitian Summer Institute
Yeah.
and, you know, achieved advanced placement, but started at the beginning level. We've trained them from all over the U.S.
Yeah, yeah.
Universities, you know, support their students with FLAS to come to our
Yeah.
program. And we wouldn't have had those resources if we hadn't been given the opportunity to fund those students at the beginning level.
Yeah.
So I think it's extremely interesting, and we're very proud that we can be in positions where we can help solve serious problems, whether they be long-term,
Yeah.
systematic, or moments of crises.
Sure.
But I think it's a bit short-sighted to believe that we're ever going to be effective doing that if we can't get the students from the beginning and cultivate that
And fund
learning.
them.
And many of these students are coming from institutions where they don't even teach Haitian Creole. So how are they ever going
How are
to
you
have the
gonna cultivate it?
opportunity
I appreciate
to
that.
study the language if they can never be funded to do it? So
Tagging on
I
that,
appreciate
in
that.
that we have the same with the MSIs and our work in working with the MSIs. Many of the MSIs do not have the capacity to bring their students to the
It's just
advanced
not
level
there.
of any language. And so, and we want to be able to
And we're
help
doing
them.
it. We're
And
doing it when we
doing
have the
it. But then-
opportunity. But I think it's contradictory to the argument for sustainability,
Yeah.
right?
If
If
you're
you're
not
really
building a
talking about
pipeline.
impact
Okay.
and sustainability, then it completely undermines that effort.
I appreciate that.
You know, I don't know how anybody could achieve that if
Okay.
we're only going to be targeting students at that level. And then the other question is, well, then are we going to be more inclined to be funding students that already have near native proficiency? Is that money well spent? You know, are you
It's
really
not.
increasing your language
You're not increasing the
speakers
pool.
when
You're right.
when they're native speakers?
You're right. No, you're right.
So.
I appreciate that. No, I appreciate the
It's a
feedback.
very complicated issue I think we're grappling with.
It
right
is,
now.
but look, I mean, I give this is a small example, but like the change that we made on Fulbright Hayes on seminars abroad, a lot of it really came out of direct impact, input from the community. So I always tell folks, like, when I go out, grill the team. If there's something that's working well, tell us it's working well. If there's something that's not, let us know. I mean, you know, the PMF situation was a disaster, and like, you know, and we just, you know, like, you know, it wasn't my area of expertise. We had to get up to speed on it, and I was like, we got to fix this. Like, this doesn't work. This isn't right. So, hopefully, we're heading in the right direction. But like, you do what you can to fix it, right? So, but that being said, if there's something in the system that's working, like, let us know. If there's something that's not, like, or if you have an idea on a different direction, then let's do that. I mean, that's same thing with the competitive preference priorities.
Yeah.
That came out of the community as well, which is great, and it's been huge. I mean, when I travel and I see the impact of that, I'm like, that's awesome.
Well, funding students who are graduate students at the beginning level of a language is working.
Okay.
And I strongly encourage the
Okay.
department to
Yeah.
reconsider this recent interpretation, I guess, is
Yeah.
how it's being presented. It's an interpretation of a regulation.
Yeah.
And they're still picking through it, but
Okay.
I think it's
Yeah,
critical.
I know Cheryl's neck
Critical.
deep on that right now. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm Todd Swanson, and I teach a distance KEEPA program that we proposed through University of Pittsburgh for this round, and we're partnering with BYU and University of Utah. And it's tied to an academic year distance program that then is tied to a summer FLAS program in the Ecuadorian Amazon, and we focus on solving problem areas, but especially environment and health. And we have experts also in tropical ecology and health. They're parallel to the FLAS program in summer. But teaching this distance program has made me aware of, I guess, two potential new issues. One is we're reaching a broader audience, obviously, because it's distance. But that means that we're reaching, I think, some of the best students who are not currently at FLAS granting institutions. And those students want to go to the summer program, and they want to apply for summer class. Some of them are very good, top students, but they're not eligible. And also, the other group that we're reaching are heritage folks, Ecuadorian Americans who want to learn Quechua, speak Spanish well, have good connections with Ecuador. They would really be some of the best people to benefit, but also not at FLAS granting institutions. They're participating now, and so there's two groups kind of people in that distance course. Some that can apply for summer FLAS, and some that can't. The other issue that it raises for me, before, you could have the same language taught in many locations because the audience was local. Once the audience becomes national through a distance program, will the USDE, will the Title VI program encourage or privilege cooperation on languages, or will it continue to sort of focus both on local programs and collaborative programs, or how will that direction go?
I think as of right now, you're able to give FLAS to students from other institutions, right? You should be able to do that, right?
Yes, and many of us, I mean, it's something that I feel very strongly about, since
Yeah.
there were fewer FLAS grantees this round.
Yeah.
It's our
Prioritize.
responsibility.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah.
it helps support these programs, right, that we all
Yes.
care about,
Yeah.
because we can't, if we're just funding our own students, it's fewer students.
Yeah, no, I don't see a change in that. I think you'll still be able to, that's not something we're going to tinker with. I think you'll still be able to give to broad students.
We're not currently able to give FLAS to to students who aren't from FLAS granting institutions.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, they
we
either, the
I think you
problem
can.
was that, I mean, I think and I think we've changed this year with programs partnering with FLAS granting institutions. Last year, there was a problem that programs run by non-FLAS institutions, and you had a student that was at a non-FLAS institution, somebody had to have a FLAS. The somebody had to be granted FLAS fellowships from the Department of Education. So either the institution running the program or the student had to be at a FLAS institution. And so now I think all of the indigenous Latin American language programs do have a FLAS institutional partner, and so that's no longer a problem.
Okay. I guess ours doesn't at the University of Pittsburgh. Maybe it's an isolated problem because they have Title VI but not FLAS.
And not Yale is a non.
I think the Title VI funding covers it. I think that's right.
I think the problem is that if you don't have a Latin American
That's right.
center,
Yes.
Yeah.
you can have you run into the problem that Todd is talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can be a FLAS granting institution, but the interpretation has been that you have to also be in the same world
What
area.
region? That's right. That is
And
true.
that can create problems for programs that have been in place for a really long time. And then there's a shift in the cycle because the home institution is no longer
No longer supporting that
represented by
center.
the world area. And for instance, one of the arguments that we tried to make originally was if there is an and I believe that Pittsburgh has an international center, a FLAS granting center, could we at the very least piggyback on that, on the fact that they have an international center, so that a long-standing program doesn't disappear or doesn't get seriously hit and hurt by a shift in the cycle.
And
Okay.
this isn't the only example, right?
Right.
We have the
No.
NAWA.
The NAWA,
program.
yeah.
We have
And also
the
Bish
Wing
Tech
at
at
San Diego.
SDS.
Yeah.
So it's a broader problem
Okay.
that still exists as far as I
And
know.
in
Yeah,
our
well,
case,
yes.
in Pittsburgh, we did, the Center for Latin American Studies has Title VI, but not FLAS. But they had a long-term FLAS before, and we were funded to do this distance language program by Title VI, but we don't have FLAS. So there is, though, an international center that does have FLAS. When we talked to them, though, they said that they were focusing on Eastern European languages and that it would not, it could harm their profile, sort of. Even if they didn't give us FLAS, they didn't really want to put the Latin American language under their umbrella, which then leaves us with a Title VI funded distance Quechua program that has very strong students, but who really are not at FLAS granting institutions and are taking a program funded by Title VI, but not from a FLAS granted granting center, although the university has FLAS. And that created
Okay.
an interesting situation, which many people are helping with in one way or another, but it's a difficult.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you a little more about that. Maybe we talk offline just to get all the details.
We don't understand why there
The
has to
rationale.
be, yeah, we don't understand the
The
rationale
rationale.
of why there has to be a FLAS granting institution or a student coming from a FLAS institution.
It seems to undermine the argument for access
Yeah,
and.
but I think what I think this came from Cheryl, is that it's the tracking and it's the evaluations. And so if you don't have that in place from one of those mechanisms, then the student can't be tracked. I mean, which I think is a barrier that we need to overcome, right? I mean, I don't think it's a good reason, but I think that's where
But
it
if
is
we're
right
getting
now.
a FLAS from,
The awarding-
if we're getting a FLAS from a
Right.
third institution, that's
Then
the
that-
FLAS.
The awarding
institution, yeah.
institution should be
We keep track
tracking.
of that.
That's right, yep, yep.
Somebody's got to.
Yeah.
They're the ones accountable for the award.
Yep.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a very
appreciate that.
significant problem, as Todd has already said, but just to reiterate it, for long-standing programs like the KETRA program, like the NAWA
Okay.
program, like the Michigan that
And
are
mosquito.
vulnerable because of this particular regulation. And we all want to collaborate to support those long-standing, high-quality programs and not let them go under, and yet this regulation is hurting
Okay.
them.
Right.
And there's been discussions of then a FLOSS granting institution trying to partner with these programs, but that's a huge thing, right? I mean, because then you've got to move the.
Okay.
We have liability issues, I think a couple of us have been approached, by, say, a program that lost FLOSS, like, would we grant the credit? Well, my institution then loses there's an issue with liability and risk management from my GC.
Yeah.
Why are we giving credit for a program that's run by another institution in order to circumvent this
Yeah.
FLOSS regulation?
administrative,
right?
workaround.
It's
Okay.
administrative workaround, but yet our institutions are very resistant because we get our hands, risk management is already a huge issue for those of us who run broad programs.
Yeah.
And, and adding in that factor, our GCs don't want to touch it.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
And why should anyone do that?
Right,
Why should there
exactly.
be this other way of
Right.
circumventing?
Convoluted
and-
workaround.
Convoluted
Yeah.
workaround.
How many students a year does this affect
We're not sure.
at your institutions?
Ours,
Yeah.
In your program every year.
we have about 10 or so summer FLAS students. Usually, and most of those come from other FLAS granting institutions, but it's the ones that are excluded. Sometimes they're
Right.
at the very
Yeah, you don't even know, you can't really.
yeah, and
You
sometimes they're
can't count
really
how many it
isolated.
affects because.
Yeah.
They're not
being-
applying.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're not coming through the
applying.
pipeline.
Right.
Yeah,
But in terms
or
of
they apply and they
programs,
can't.
there are several.
Well, for example, say, I'm going to go back to the MSIs because this is a good example.
Yes.
We are encouraged to
Yeah.
work with the MSIs, right? And we'll
But
go
then if you
back.
can't get
We
them
have
applying.
a student maybe at an MSI who wants to study mosquito and that
Kansas,
makes
yeah.
sense because they're at an HBCU but yet I cannot give them a FLOSS to go study mosquito because one, the MSI is not a FLOSS granting institution and the mosquito Summer Institute
Kansas
is not
isn't.
at a FLOSS granting institution.
Hmm.
They can't go. But yet I want.
I mean, they're unfundable.
You want that
by
pipeline.
anyone.
They're
That's
unfundable
they're
by anyone.
unfundable. I mean, so it's like the student is unfundable, and that's depending on their language, and that's sad.
So counterintuitive
we
to
got
the
a
spirit
workaround.
of the grant.
Yeah.
It's about access.
It's
and-
You found a workaround.
Yeah.
So I talked to Carolyn, and she talked to Cheryl, and I guess it's been approved this way, but, and this is what we've done with Todd, but because UGA's tuition is cheap, I mean, it's like $100 per credit hour, what we can do is actually accept the student as a transient student for a 1-hour credit. That actually complies with everything. They become a UGA student because that's the only way that we can actually accept a
But
student.
that's another.
But that's,
It's a workaround.
it's a
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
complicated thing, and
Yeah.
it's taking me a long time to get that whole process set up.
Okay.
And it's
Not
still in the
efficient.
works,
Yeah.
but that's the only way that we can actually figure out how to accept a Yale student, for example, to go to the Kitchell program. And
We're doing the same thing, and it's just, it's kind of silly.
Yeah.
It's a silly, and it creates burden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also
Yeah,
the case, I
understand.
mean, the access issue
Yeah.
is real. It's the big push from the Department of Education is access, which we all support and are on board with. That's huge. And just what you said earlier about the department, about a shift toward saying you want to provide seed money for institution and then make these programs sustainable and then
Move it
shift
on.
it to another. If that's the wave of the future or the present and the
Yeah.
future, this is only going to be a bigger problem.
Okay.
Because if an institution that supports a program loses their FLAS because of, having greater impact on on a new institution coming up,
Yeah.
then we've got even more programs that are sort of
Okay.
orphaned.
Yeah.
These are orphaned programs.
Okay.
And it's great.
And we don't want to see them orphaned.
No, yeah.
I don't see that being as much on the with the NRCs and FLAS, to be honest, because there's still a mandate there to train experts. So there is a recognition of the historic work that's been done by the institutions. I think that's probably a little more applicable with a program like Useful. That's really designed to be a seed grant program. But that being said, obviously we want you all to be innovative and things like that. But I think the point's well taken. I'd love to talk to you guys a little bit more about kind of the mechanics of this. I think Cheryl and Carolyn are probably a little bit better. They're a little more in the weeds, but maybe we could connect when I'm back in DC to kind of go through this a little more.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
would be.
Just to see what can be ironed out and what can be made a little easier and what
It'd be
makes sense.
interesting to see how much of it is relatively internal to IFLE
Uh-huh.
versus what might be in the regs.
Yeah.
It'd be more difficult.
Sometimes it is. It's stuff in the regs. Sometimes it's stuff with OGC, with the general counsel's office, and there's stuff that we try to push back on as well, but they don't budge. So I appreciate that. Yeah.
I'd also just like to put in a plug for, the encouragement for cooperation between universities. I actually work at a Center for Southeast Asian Studies, so I'm at this meeting kind of in an odd way, but Southeast Asian Studies at Wisconsin, and one of my jobs there is to coordinate the summer intensive Southeast Asian language program. And for many, many years, all the Southeast Asian NRCs could choose if they wanted to, and they did for years. Really, I thought it was tremendously beneficial for the whole nation. They would, sometimes give their entire summer FLOS allocation to the summer intensive program, and we would hold a national competition. So we could give a FLOS grant. It made FLOS for summer intensive language instruction for Southeast Asian languages available to anybody around the country. And then, 7, 8, 9 years ago, so there was a change again in interpretation that told us, the NRCs, you will be penalized if you don't give as much of your FLOS money to your own students as possible, that's not going to look good. So then the other NRCs now don't support that summer program anymore, which, again, it's fine, it's their money. If they didn't want to do that in the first place, that's always been their decision to make. But it wound up serving, a smaller number of students just from the NRCs rather than being able to make the impact broad. So I don't know, just putting in a plug for, recognizing or putting priority points or whatever towards cooperative kinds of ventures that have a broad impact.
Yeah.
Well, and if access is the priority, not just saying access is the priority, but thinking about the mechanics behind that and
Making it easier.
what supports it and what hinders it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are a few kind of contradictory concepts, I think, in the grant that I think are probably just the consequence of new priorities popping up and not
old regs still being
thinking
there.
about the execution. I know we all have
Yeah.
comment periods and we
Yeah.
should be participating in
Please,
those
please,
because we
yeah.
are the ones administering them. But
Yeah.
for me, access is key, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of these have
Yeah.
to be supported in a logical way.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And it's, again, the feedback is critical. That's where, you saw the movement towards being able to give sub-grants as well. And,
Yeah.
What about Cuba? What's the Department of Ed's
So,
plan for Cuba?
cool. So, one of the things, the visit's coming up pretty soon.
Obama, the Rolling Stones, and a baseball game all in the same trip.
So, with our seminars abroad is really where we have the most flexibility. I don't know if any of you guys have gotten GPA grants in the past, so GPA is an opportunity for you all to step up and say, hey, listen, I want to take a group of, students or pre-service teachers or whoever to Cuba, and we would certainly love to see what you guys are thinking about that.
Yeah.
Please do. Seminars is where we have a little more control over that, and that's actually something I've been pushing the team to think about. So we've started some conversations with folks at State, and I'm really glad that I'm here.
The ambassador.
Well, I don't know. Not sure. But with regards to seminars abroad, actually, we'll be looking to the Latin American Studies community to see if there is someone who can help us put a trip together. So the folks at our West Africa Overseas Research Center, WARC, I think is the acronym. They're helping us with the trip to Senegal. So I'd love to see one of the NRCs step up, or a group of NRCs say, hey, listen, here's our proposal for doing a seminars abroad trip to Cuba next summer. I would love to see that happen. So nudge, nudge from me. I think it'd be I think it'd be a really cool opportunity to take some teachers.
Carolyn has actually been really, really great
Good.
in this regard.
Good.
Because she recently approved using some NRC funds to support
Good.
the travel for a co-leader for K
Good.
through 12
Good.
this summer.
Good.
So she's been great finding ways for us to even use our existing NRC money
Yeah.
to support Cuba
Good.
initiatives. So
Good.
just
Good. And expect to see more of that.
Yeah.
Expect to see more of
kudos to
that.
her.
Yeah.
And
She's been
please go back
fantastic.
and
She's
thank
been
her.
Yes,
fantastic
please.
to
I
work
have
with.
concur. We're able to do the same thing this summer
Good.
with the teachers program to
Good.
Cuba. And whereas years ago, we were told absolutely in no
Yeah.
uncertain terms were we to use one penny towards anything that had
Yep.
to do with Cuba. And it's
Yep.
been a fantastic shift
Yeah.
for those of us who have been trudging in the trenches
Mhm.
for years down there,
Yeah.
waiting for it to open.
Really excited about it. I think it's a great opportunity to be creative with programming and with teaching and really expose students to. I'm super excited about it. I'm excited to learn more about it. So I think it'll be great. I want to get back to the distance learning conversation as well, because I know that's why you all are here. How else can we be helpful in terms of partnerships? Because that's one thing that we're sort of in a position a little more to open doors. Are there folks that we should be connecting with, that the department should be reaching out to sort of put in front of you and say, hey, listen, we've got these great NRCs, you should work with them? Because I do that already.
Help with technology. I mean,
Okay.
I don't want to be a broken record, but
Be a little more specific on
from
that.
what we've been talking about, the ability to purchase the technology that we need on our
Okay.
campuses, and the campuses, the MSIs that we
Okay.
would like to work with to share language.
What about platforms like 2U, or Coursera is obviously a different model, but some of these big MOOC providers, are they helpful at all?
We have some great colleagues here.
They've been sharing some
I'll
great
put it
ideas.
right back to you guys. Do you want to facilitate language learning through MOOC-style asynchronous exchanges?
No.
No, but y'all, the Blue Jeans, the suggestions that y'all had yesterday, the Blue Jeans
And
and the
Zoom.
Zoom are fairly low cost,
I
right?
think less than focusing on the technology, before we start looking at tools, I think the point is that the dynamics that we privilege in these language learning environments are synchronous. So we need
Yeah.
to be able to get people to see and hear each other at the same
Yeah.
time. And those are the tools that we're looking to
Okay.
propagate.
Okay. So let me frame it like this. If there are folks, and I'll leave it to you, if there are folks that you would like for us, if you want us to play a role in it, we will, to help facilitate contacts. I don't know if you guys know, we opened the door, I shouldn't say open the door, but really I think facilitated a great conversation with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. It was one that just wasn't there. My vision was that, let's start the conversation with the business community only because, well, I shouldn't say only because, a big part of it was, look, if folks were seeing kind of language learning off in left field, I wanted to make it relevant. I want to make it really relevant to the business community, and I needed, frankly, the business community to be able to say, hey, these guys are doing really important work. This is our bench. and I say this with all due respect, my parents are both educators, but it's one thing to take teachers up on the hill, it's another thing to take CEOs up on the hill who are saying, like,
Yeah.
we're not going to be able to, exports are going to die if we don't have people who can do this. So that was really important to have that conversation. So we facilitated this discussion with the U.S. Chamber for the cybers initially. My vision was, well, the cybers speak the same language, let's position them first, and then let's open it up beyond that to NRCs and LRCs to be a part of that discussion. And I think it's been a great one. The cybers are coming into town next week for like a summit they're having on like global talent. So I'm really excited in how that's going. On the same note, if there are other groups that we should reach out to on your behalf, for the whole NRC community, because I think this is a model that we'd love to see duplicated, let us know. Yeah.
Well, one thing what I think would help a lot, once you have a Title VI funded distance program, students especially if it's accessible to students at any NRC, then you get students who become aware of it, and they say, I would like to take that, but they don't do it a year in advance. They kind of do it a few months in advance. And then the various NRCs are approved for specific languages. So you get somebody who's very good at Nawa in some school that has only requested Maya, let's say. And it would be good to have sort of some kind of policy or statement on behalf of from the Department of Education, that whether it's a good idea or whether it's not a good idea, but to have some sort of a policy that if there is a strong student at some university, and there's only one, and that language that student wants is taught by a Title VI funded distance program, that the USDE would not look discouragingly on a quick approval for that center to allow that student to be funded for class.
Okay.
Or, just a decision one way or another. Because what I find now is that the students, they connect with our class, and then they say, well, I don't know if my NRC would consider this for class, and actually the centers don't always know either whether that's possible.
I think an important acronym that was thrown out, and you said earlier, is the LRCs. And of course, I'm the outsider into this group, and I've listened yesterday very carefully. Very interesting thoughts, but one of the things that, for me as somebody who's been more involved with language research centers, is that I haven't heard their names been thrown around in this room. And they are creating platforms, they're creating tools, they're creating training webinars for all of this distance language education. It's all there, it's all ready. So I think maybe some closer communication and collaboration between the NRCs and the LRCs would be a very good first starting point to get this moving forward.
Senta, I'm gonna kind of respond to that, because for many years we have been trying as a Latin American group to forge a relationship with an LRC, not to much success at all, actually, for, only in spotty areas. It's just, we have not been able to, find a center that will prioritize our LCTLs. I mean, and they have very special needs that are like Southeast Asian. Their technology and their research seems to be on more commonly taught languages. And we all have worked with LRCs, and we just have not been able to sustain long-term relationships with them.
But a lot of the materials are language specific. I mean, if I look at CLEAR and the whole gamut of tools that they've developed,
but we're training native, a lot of times we're trying to train our native speakers of the indigenous languages. Who don't speak English.
Maybe IFLE could facilitate a meeting. Perhaps if you organized, your office organized a meeting and brought some NRCs and LRCs together.
Absolutely.
There could be some brainstorming that would take place, and we could maybe figure out how we could
kind of
work
like
together.
this, but bigger, but with all the rules.
So I kind of get your feedback on something. We got some really good feedback from the last project directors meeting. We just I wanted the team to do it a little bit differently, and I think it worked out well. There was a lot more unstructured time for collaboration, and we got really good feedback out of it, and a lot of good things for us came out of it. We thought about doing one this summer, but the funding's just not there for us to convene everyone. We thought about doing it online, and I just kind of want like a gut check, like.
Not the same.
It's obviously, well, it's clearly not the same. I would love to see an institution host it, but there's also a cost to them, and I mean, it's expensive, right? But we thought about maybe, you guys know we do these webinars, right?
Yeah.
So we thought about what if we were to, do it all webinar style? Like, it's not ideal, but is that sufficient or not?
There's just so much gain from the unpredictable interactions that you're going to have with the
Yeah.
other people. That I
Yeah.
think that's
No, it's great to have people in the
most
room.
valuable part of it.
Okay.
So, and you just don't get that.
I would almost rather you wait to see
Agreed.
if funding would become available at some point. I don't know, I'm not inclined to.
I wouldn't bank on additional funding, to be honest. Look, I mean, here's sort of my political calculus. You guys saw, so just to go back to the FY17 budget, you guys saw they put a $5 million reduction down for Fulbright Hayes. The OMB justification, which was bizarre, said they wanted to take from the overseas programs and put it in domestic, but it wasn't reflected in the domestic number either. So
where'd it go?
Where to go? Exactly. It went into some other initiative. So we're fighting that right now. It's been really frustrating. I'll leave it. It's been very frustrating. It's a very opaque process, and that's just kind of how the sausage is made. I can't comment too much on the election. I can't comment on the election. But that being said, one of the things that's happened over the last few years is we've really lost our champions up on the Hill, and we're doing a lot of work to try to find new champions on the Hill. And part of that, I'm really drilling hard on national security now. I mean, I hate to I don't want to say reduce. I hate to reduce the work that everyone does to national security and competitiveness, but my job is to protect the programs and to sell the programs.
Yeah.
Some people don't really care to hear about access. They want to hear about, are we staying safe and are we exporting more? So that's why a lot of my messaging and communications has been around those two particular things. So as you all have information about that, share it with me. But up on the Hill, I don't know that I would expect to see that. But our strategy and what I've been pushing folks within the department to think about is restoration of funding back to 2010 levels. Not just only, but because we are, I think, demonstrating impact in a way that we never have.
Yeah.
We're talking about our impact in a way that we never have. And we're serving more students than we ever have. I mean, if we're talking about there's students at MSIs and HBCUs who don't have access to funding, that's a problem. That's a problem, and we can't talk about our commitment to HBCUs and MSIs and leave the language piece out of it. And then people in the department are beginning to see that. What I worry about is our runway is pretty short. We have to think about the next administration. So a lot of this messaging, I'm making sure that Cheryl and Lenore and Carol and folks on my team are embedding the messaging in the career staff, so it doesn't get lost in turnover. So that's a little bit about how we're thinking about it. Let me ask you a quick question on the LRC. What is the resistance in terms of hesitation to?
For many years, I will say from personal experience, we worked with San Diego State, right? But then they seem to move away from working with indigenous language, with us. I think it's just a matter of different cultures working together, and CENTA, I think one of the very few in area studies are language people. And I think that there's sometimes a cultural issue working with each other in academic cultures.
Yeah.
And it's funding, and it's what if your university is telling you to focus on something else, then you have to follow your bosses.
So let me ask this, because we are starting to think about the next cycle. We're thinking about a few things for the next cycle. And one of them that has popped up is sort of the role of LRCs. They do a lot of great work. I haven't visited with all of them, but I'm wondering who is doing this well? Who is doing this really well? I think somebody mentioned there's some platforms out there that are working well. Who's got it and who's doing it well?
Well, So the Hawaii Center has wonderful online webinars for online teaching. That if you want to move your program in the direction of online language teaching, that would be a place that I would send a teacher to learn about it.
And is this synchronous teaching?
No, they're archived. They did it as a synchronous thing, and now it's archived. I don't know if they've proposed another set of webinars that would be synchronous.
But
I
are
don't know.
they tools and resources to support synchronous online or?
Current learning.
Okay.
Yes, the what you're talking about are synchronous materials.
Because one of the things that I've been thinking about, sort of the way,
Sykes, I think, would be a great resource.
Who, I'm sorry? Oregon?
At University of Oregon, because she works on Spanish as her primary language. She does a lot of place-based learning, so the kinds of things that you talked about earlier about the virtual place-based tagging of materials, I think that's where she would have a lot of experience and a lot of resources to contribute. Claire has asynchronous tools that can play a crucial role in a online or distance learning course, not during the synchronous portion, but the otherwise. I think for the synchronous portion, there are really good commercial products out there. So I think there are people, and so you have proposed the webinars, which the response was not enthusiastic.
That's okay.
But
Sorry, doesn't hurt my
I wonder
feelings.
if there could be an intermediate step, and maybe that's the issue. Maybe there is no conference, no event where people that are involved in these two places ever show up together.
Yeah.
But if there were, that would be an intermediate step. So, I'm not in your languages. So is there a place where you show up, where some of the people from the LRC show up, where you could have that meeting, where we're in
We
person?
can convene folks. I can convene folks. That's easy. I just want to make sure it's a good use of your time. I mean, I'd rather, if you guys are going to be in DC, then we can pull some folks, and that's easy. I just want to get as I want to make life easier on you. Yeah, simple on you. But if the group wants to get together, I mean, I'd love to pull folks together. We can host folks at the department. We can pull in the LRC community to have the discussion.
And I think discussions about open educational resources, for instance, should be happening without involving the Center for Open Educational Resources in Language Learning at the University of Texas, Austin. Carl Blythe there. These languages, we will be talking about the National Heritage Language Resource Center at UCLA and their work.
I appreciate that.
It's incredibly important. Arizona is doing fantastic work.
Really?
Trying to define what it is about language teaching and the kind of intercultural dimension that you were mentioning a little bit earlier, that we can't understand other people without understanding the culture of the language. And they're really operationalizing that. Another thing happening in Oregon is looking at language learners over the life span and developing portfolios, thinking about how learners can be empowered to track their own development and how we can support that and to make that sort of these traces evident to people who want to know, what kind of impact globally are our learners making.
I think it could,
Those are some great centers.
it could be an issue of awareness. Like if we know what the resources are from the language resource centers and match them with our needs, what we're generating. This is the first time in many years that all our NRCs and class there were meeting to put things on the table and figure out. So it's a good moment. I think
Maybe it could even be something as simple as IFLE putting a call out to existing LRCs and asking them to respond to IFLE with an inventory of resources they have available that could be applicable to Latin American languages, and just see. It'd be interesting just to see what their response is. If it was solicited from your office.
Yeah, well, I think, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that, and we'll definitely do that. I think what I'm thinking about a little bit more is on this issue of sustainability. You guys are teaching the students. You guys are doing research. You're doing a lot of the work. I'm curious to see that if in the next cycle there is a way that we can help support infrastructure a little better, not just for Latin American locals, but across the board. What does that look like? What's the cost look like? I don't know if you want the federal government to manage something like that, but if it's a grantee, I think that's obviously probably a better arrangement. But who's got the bandwidth to support it for a lot of schools and a lot of students, and how reliable? I mean, I think those are some of the questions that I've got, but I think it's worth the investment.
Part of the leveraging that an applicant could be expected to provide is to be able to demonstrate that they do have the existing IT support.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it's really fair to ask the Department of Education to provide funding for IT support.
No.
I mean, I think that's something that an
We will.
institution should be able to
Yeah,
provide.
yeah.
But if the Department of Ed could provide funds for that initial, hardware,
To see it,
software
yeah.
investment that you need to get going, and then we can ensure that we can support it, I think that's reasonable.
But to
Yeah.
improve the communication, maybe one way to think about it is, because we want to support all NRCs, not,
Yeah.
they're invested in Latin American studies, I get it, but there's others, let's support them too. So maybe there can be an LRC partner for each area. So maybe Julie Sykes becomes the Latin American studies partners, and she will share what LRCs are doing and what might be useful for the kinds of needs and discussions you have. Somebody from a different LRC becomes the partner for the Southeast Asian languages or something.
Okay. I appreciate
Can
that.
I just give a hands-on example? So while we've
Sure.
been sitting here, I went to the Language Resource Center portal. They have a great.
They do have their
a
website,
great
really good
web
website,
portal
yeah.
That was supposed to be done by NRCs, but I don't know whatever happened to it. So they have a resource search
Yeah.
on there, and for lictals. And so we're looking at the pull-down menu, so it can search all the resources they have on lictals. There's less than a handful of Latin American lictals
Okay.
on here. I mean, we found Aymara, there's no Mayan languages, Quechua is not on here. These are major languages
Significant, yeah,
that we
that's
teach.
significant.
And so there's a disconnect
disconnect.
between
Okay.
us.
Between the communities?
Yeah, it's just a
absolutely.
disconnect, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, if it's a matter of getting folks in a room, that's easy. Huh?
I think it might be a labeling issue, because a lot of the resources are language non-specific, so they're not tagged as a certain language because they're for all languages. So again,
But-
they
The
could-
metadata.
the labeling,
Well, when you look
the
at
tagging.
Santa,
would
there's
be
lots of
improved.
languages on here. And they're Turkmen,
Okay.
Tonga, like languages that I don't recognize from other world areas, and very few are Latin American.
If we were to pull folks together, something less structured, how do you sort of envision that?
I mean, it could even be initially just, it could even start with getting a small group of people together, right?
Okay.
Like kind of picking 12 to 20 people from different institutions just to have initial conversations. That's something that a group of us did, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago. IFLE, but brought some people in to talk about how to coordinate better on summer programs, so that we were sharing resources, and it was a huge change. It was really beneficial. So sometimes these discussions, if you just have a small group to start, and then you can build from
Balloons
there
out to the
once you
broader
have
community.
some-
Okay.
some feedback.
Okay, that's easy.
It's more like a strategic planning
Yeah.
exercise.
This just brought up a question for me. I'm working with Janice Knuckles, who's a full professor at BYU, and the consortium with, she's got some Title VI money for resource development in Keynote. We're working together on this. We don't know how to connect with, and materials, how we connect with an LRC. And I wonder if that ignorance is broad, or in other words, you don't find those resources there, but who would put Quechua into an LRC if it wasn't somebody like Janice Knuckles? And I wonder if it's not similar with linguists working in various areas, that there's a disconnect between the linguists working on Latin American lictals and the NRCs. It's just a question.
So you're saying
I
it's
don't-
tough to find out what languages are taught where?
Well, I mean, if there are resources on specific languages in the LRCs, are the linguists that would be working in Nahuatl, in the Mayan languages, in Quechua, do they know how to connect their language development activities to the LRCs so that they're shareable? I'm sure that we would want to do that, but we don't know how.
It's another disconnect. I mean, it's just another example of the disconnect.
Okay.
And if
Projects
if we're considering a meeting, I'm wondering if this is a role for the Consortium of Latin American Studies programs. If we could collaborate with your office.
Yeah.
To bring together
Absolutely.
some key people to the table.
I think it'd be
and have
great.
This conversation.
I would
Yeah.
say that
Yeah.
for Southeast Asian, the NRCs work together, so if they said,
Right,
okay,
so there's-
3 of our group or whatever,
Because that's also,
We'll
I
come to
mean,
that same sort of meeting.
these types, these organizations can also then make sure that the rest of the group is getting the
informed.
information after the meeting, a small meeting takes place.
I appreciate that.
We're sharing
Yeah.
that.
Are any of you all involved with the CIC?
Some.
And how is that funded? How's it funded? How's it operated? Because it seems to work very well, from what I
I
understand.
think the issue with CIC, for those of us who are not part of the big
Yeah, it is Big Ten exclusive. That drives me a little
It's
nuts.
like a
Yes.
dream collaboration for some of us.
We just cannot get anywhere near both the cooperation and the amount of money that we're talking about.
It's the money.
for CIC.
Yeah.
So we really need to come up with models that are more mid-range.
Okay.
That can really allow us
Yes.
to pool what we have at our institutions together.
Do you guys have a sense of how much they dump into it?
Hmm?
How much they dump into it? How much money goes into it?
Oh,
I
God,
don't-
it's
I
in
mean,
millions and millions,
I
according to
don't
her
know.
slide yesterday.
They've got a staff of 25.
And 25
Yeah.
people dedicated to this.
Had a fancy
We had a
building
presenter
with
yesterday.
So the provost of each of those campuses.
They've committed to it, yeah.
Makes an annual commitment, but even with, like, Wisconsin is a CIC institution, but for this summer program that I work with and, which can help for distance students, whatever, that's, the CIC course share for language, liquid language stuff is only, it only works for students at the CIC institutions who are paying tuition to their own institutions. So so a program like mine can't, even though I'm at a CIC institution, we can't use course share because I need to get tuition from students. I need those dollars
Yeah.
to pay our instructors. So even within CIC, it's not always.
Yeah, well, let's say that the potential is there. We just
Oh,
have to
absolutely.
figure out,
But the
maybe work at different levels.
CIC is not, at least short-term, replicable.
It's not viable.
Yeah. So we're part of Utah's part of the Pac-12 now, but there's no umbrella administrative academic side to the athletic conference for the Pac-12. The CIC has that. It's
Right.
not just course sharing with LCTLs. They have a whole
They share lab equipment,
administrative
they share
umbrella of collaboration
library
between these
research.
institutions that we can't create, right?
What's to prevent institutions from buying into the CIC?
They have to be invited.
You have to be part of the.
You have to be part of
Yeah, you have
the.
I mean, I realize it's Big Ten, but I mean, let's take that piece out of it.
You gotta talk to University of
Yeah, I
Wisconsin and Rutgers, I mean.
I mean, it's somewhat arbitrary, right? The Big Ten. I mean, it's not. It's a sports conference. Come on.
Good question.
Yeah. I mean, we're in the Big Ten Center with like the sports commentator station.
Yeah.
That's the
Well, I mean,
building
I
that we
think-
have our academic session, so it's obviously driven by athletics.
No,
and,
yeah. Well, that's what I'm asking. I mean, it seems arbitrary to me.
Really, really great
Yeah.
job.
I appreciate school loyalty, but it seems a little
Yesterday,
arbitrary.
Amber was talking about it was really the support of the administrators, right?
Right.
Yeah.
At each school. And that in the process of developing it, they met many roadblocks, and essentially everybody has finally come to the table, and they have said, we're not going to go down the road of overcomplicating every decision. We're all here in good faith. Money is not going to, this is not going to be a revenue generator for our home institution.
Fair enough.
It's about the learning. So it was really personalities. I think the concern would be, could we really get all of the personalities to work with one another? They should, but
But it's also, that's controlled at the
That's a buy-in.
provost.
It's a provost deal thing.
level. Like, for example, at Tulane, we belong to this group called the Colonial Group. Please.
cultural sensitivity training.
Right, I know. It is, yes. Hey, Boston College and Boston University are in there too, okay? But, so a couple of years ago, we got, the word, we're going to course share Haitian Creole, we're going to create a classroom, Tulane's going to teach it. And then it fizzled, and I went back to the provost's office, I said, what happened? They're like, nobody wanted to invest the money that it needed.
To get it off the ground.
To get off the ground. So it's like, we can't say, but hey, we're a Title VI, you should have done this. And, no, we just don't want to spend the money. So we're, again, pressures are coming from down financially on our ends also, especially at the state institutions. I know that my colleagues here are all stretched for money. So it's a lot of times it is the financial.
It's the money.
Yeah.
And I think one of the genius things about the CIC is exactly what you said, is that ego and stake in the finances was given up. So for example, I'm part of one of the CIC study abroad programs that I co-lead, and we all charge a different fee. And it's okay, right? I mean, it's a CIC program, but each of our institution has a different fee that works for our particular institution, which really stinks for the University of Michigan students because they pay double of what the other 3 partners pay. But it's, we all have our own rules still, and so I think oftentimes when people come to the table to form a consortium, it's this idea of we need to agree on every detail, and we need to be, and once you get that micromanaged, it falls apart. So if you let go of control, which is very hard for academics, then it can be much better.
It is, but I'm just wondering if there's something we can do in terms of prioritizing it from a point value going into the next competition, to really try to build the infrastructure, because I don't think it makes sense to duplicate. If that's something that's there and it functions and infrastructure works, and it's a matter of folks from other institutions buying in and sharing in, that makes sense. Resources are tight for everybody, for us as well. I mean, I wish I could double our budget. We can't. I'm going to dig into that a little bit, actually.
If we look at, CIC is huge, right? But if we look at Arizona, and I left Arizona 10 years ago, so it might no longer be true. But when I left Arizona, we went to a different model of, I mean, there's always been, the regions control everything in the entire state, right? Michigan, different. We have our own board of regions for each institution, and they don't really care to talk to each other or come to some sort of consensus. But in Arizona, they worked together, and they did exactly that. Let's have this institution be strong here, because that's where it's strong, and have this other institution be over here. So there's a smaller structure of coordinating with each other, so not to prevent duplication and work on supporting each program strength.
And also, there's not a unique or single way of getting at this. I think it's just very different levels. And what we're trying to figure out here is what's the best way that we can leverage our resources or investment that we have to serve the largest number of students. And maybe one mechanism is through CIC, and if it works with some programs, it's fine. But there might be others that we can explore. So it's just the nature of the issue now that it's just cutting off with us. So
It's partnerships.
Okay.
But I do think the partnerships are very, very difficult for some state institutions.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, in
Absolutely.
the SEC conference, we hate each other. There's no way in hell we're going to work together.
So that's SEC schools.
I mean, I feel like it's going to be very, very difficult to do a model like the CIC. So if that is like a point system, if you're thinking about kind of favoring that, and in the next round,
well, we
enjoyed our NRC for a while.
I'm thinking about it more so of is there a single grantee that we could fund? I'm just thinking out loud. Is there a single grantee that we could fund that could at least be the hub or provide or be sort of the hub of infrastructure for everyone else?
That would be amazing.
That's what I'm thinking, because I think financially it makes sense. Now, whether or not we can implement that from a,
I mean, and I would say CLASP has served as our hub, and it's because we commit our volunteer time. I know it's a small institutional organization of Latin American studies programs that are Title VI all the way down to one single person at a college. But we do this voluntarily out of love. And when we have a lack in lag in leadership, we kind of fall off our projects. But funding a hub would be awesome.
Great idea. All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate it. Thank you guys. Thank you guys. I know, thank you guys. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for all that you're doing. We appreciate it. I appreciate the feedback and honestly the tough questions. Keep them coming, because they're good for our team, and I'm really proud of my team. I'm really proud of the work that they're doing. But we're there to support you, and I want you guys to see us as partners. So you guys brought up some great points. Can you guys follow up with some emails, and we'll keep the conversation going. And
Great.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Thank you. So
Thanks.
why don't we take a break until 10:40? Why don't we, I don't know, what should we do, Becky? Take a break until 11?
Yeah.
Okay, why don't we take like a 15-minute break? Once everybody's back, we'll